Distinguished Lord Changping, my fellow co-winner, distinguished members of TI. I'll start with a story about my suit. A fellow Portuguese journalist told me once that I went for an interview and looked very unkempt, and he said, well, mind if I give you something? I said, no. And he said, well, I have a nice suit for you because you have to show those corrupt officials that you can look very nice without being corrupt. And then I said, how many suits do you have? So ever since when I go to an event like this, I bring one of his suits. And I also took some 20 ties from his wardrobe. And then I've been looking good ever since. Last July, I was summoned by the Angolan Attorney General on 11 criminal complaints brought against me by 7 generals, after I exposed their links to systemic human rights abuses and corruption involving their enterprises in the private security and diamond sectors. While I was under investigation, a group of youngsters gathered in the square in front of the National Directorate for Investigations and Penal Action to express their solidarity and to encourage me. Among them, there was a 17-year-old fellow by the name of Manuel Nito Alves. It was the first time I met him, though previously I had admired his courage as an anti-regime protester. I joked with him by calling him a troublemaker and reproached him for exposing himself unnecessarily. He has been experiencing political prosecution, brief arrests, and beatings since the age of 15. For his views and streetwise initiatives for freedom of expression against authoritarian rule and corruption, he has been a target of the state security apparatus. Today, I'm here to proudly receive this award in the name of Manuel Nito Alves, to whom I dedicate this honor. He has been in jail for the past 2 months, charged with outrage against the president. Angolan legislation that came into force in 2010 established such outrage as a crime against state security. Nito Alves is suspected of attempting to print 20 T-shirts, not more, with a slogan calling President José Eduardo dos Santos a disgusting dictator. A minor is being treated as a terrorist because of 20 T-shirts. Last month, Angolans faced 3 landmark events that encapsulated the state of governance in the country and which prove that President dos Santos is indeed a corrupt dictator. First, in his State of the Nation address, President dos Santos spoke in favor of the primitive accumulation of capital in Angola and in Africa in general, to ward off any criticisms of corruption and justified the wealth of his family and his cronies. Secondly, for the first time in the country's history, the government submitted the state's general account, the budget for 2011, to Parliament for approval. This procedure was showcased as another step towards transparency and good governance. However, the President, as head of the government, did not submit reports for more than 70% of the expenditures of the 2011 state budget. Nevertheless, as the third interconnected event, the Constitutional Court ruled as unconstitutional the Parliament's oversight of the government, except for passing laws and the state budgets. According to this ruling, the Constitution, and I quote, does not grant the National Assembly the power to raise questions and inquire into the acts of government, nor does it have the right attributions to call upon the ministers, ask them questions, or hold hearings, because in Angola, the ministers of state, ministers, and provincial governors discharge their duties as defined by the head of the executive, who is the President of the Republic. I quoted. Thus, the Constitutional Court ruled that to have the power to make demands upon members of the government would be the same as having the power to make demands upon the President of the Republic, who is the head of the executive, which is, the Constitutional Court states, constitutionally unacceptable. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today because of my work in exposing corruption. I have always based my standards on the Angolan legislation that exists supposedly to ensure good governance and probity. The above-mentioned events are not a surprise, but they are a pattern of institutionalized impunity. Elections held in 2012 and the judicial system have been used only to provide a veneer of legitimacy to a kleptocratic regime that sees no end in plundering its own country and has no regard for the future of its citizens. As hopeful as I am, I have engaged in raising public awareness on the existing anti-corruption legislation. Endemic corruption has become the main institution in the country. It is now a badge of honor for the ruling elite and the pursuit for those aspiring for a better life or to a better life. Yet, I strongly believe that it is possible to change the public mindset and making corruption what it is, a crime under Angolan legislation that must be dealt with as such. This is why I have lodged a number of criminal complaints against senior government officials and generals whom I have exposed as using public office to advance their private interests for personal enrichment. These are deals worth several billions of dollars. In response, the Office of the Attorney General has shelved such complaints on the grounds that those public officials on duty have the right as any citizens to legally own private companies that engage in business with the state, from oil, diamonds, to public contracts, as long as they do not manage directly their private affairs. In a recent investigation I co-authored for Forbes magazine, I disclosed evidence on how President dos Santos used his office to issue decrees that enabled his daughter, Isabel dos Santos, to build a $3 billion business empire through illicit transfer of state assets, shares, and funds in less than 10 years. At the moment, I am investigating how a state-owned diamond company, Sodiam, which holds the exclusive rights to market the industrial production of Angolan diamonds, has a secret joint venture in Malta with the President dos Santos' son-in-law. In 2012, this joint venture, called Victoria Holding Limited, in which each party holds 50% of the shares, bought 72.5% of the shares of Swiss jewelry maker, the Grisogonio. But through the documents I have accessed, Mr. Fawaz Gruozi, formerly the owner of the Grisogonio, received in exchange 20% of the shares in Victoria Holding. In essence, once again, there is no record that the presidential family paid a cent to have such shares and be in control of half of the Angolan diamonds marketed through this secret company. Furthermore, because it is a secret, this company does not turn up in the national accounting system as an investment of the Angolan state. Through this deal, diamonds worth hundreds of millions of dollars may now be siphoned from the Angolan treasury on a regular basis through a venerable jewelry maker that caters for Hollywood celebrities. Ladies and gentlemen, it is at this juncture that foreign investors, international companies, and governments eager to advance their business interests in my country or attract Angolan money have become the support mechanisms of corruption in Angola alongside repression. To succeed in Angola, foreign investors must associate themselves through joint ventures with the presidential family, relevant government officials and generals, or those nominated by the powers that might be. Such joint ventures, once involving the state, break the anti-corruption legislation, and they can only survive due to the impunity enjoyed by the regime. Western multinationals and governments, and China in particular, therefore find it in their interest to protect such nefarious alliances, in which the only losers are the Angolan people. Much of the Angolan state budget is being spent on repression of the people. But corruption is also undermining the very foundations of the regime. And I give an example. For the 2013 budget that just and fiscal year that just ended, President dos Santos had allocated $13.1 billion in defense and security appropriations. And this is the largest budget for a defense force in sub-Saharan Africa. In spite of all these resources to date, the government is unable to provide basic food rations, uniforms, boots, and basic living conditions for the military, the police, and other agents of repression. This is because the generals and the president's cronies steal much of the money. And that is also a fault line for eventual uprising. And this is how Nito Alves' arrest represents far more than a single activist in jail. It is also an illustration of how the regime has lost its bearings and has become erratic in its actions. I'm happy to announce that Nito Alves was released this afternoon after I had written my speech under term of identity. And residence to wait for trial. And I sing, "Oh, happy day." I ask you to join me in demanding the unconditional release of Nito Alves. I also call upon you to stand up with the Angolan people and be part of the solution and not of the problem. And I thank you wholeheartedly for having provided me with such an excellent opportunity to renew the cause of fighting against corruption in Angola. Thank you.